What do you see the forum has already achieved and can be built on for the near future interactions?
So I think one key element is climate. It's a shared global challenge. We all need to be working together on it. It was a big theme at the annual meeting in Davos.
Yes.
It's a big theme here again in Summer Davos. And it's clearly something that mobilizes people from all around the world to be able to take action. There was a lot of activity here around Trillion Trees, around the Tropical Forest Alliance, around using the power of technology and innovation to solve some climate challenges, scaling some of those solutions. And of course, the fact that we were doing that here in China is also critical because China is one of the most important leaders and suppliers of this green transition.
The other thing, of course, is about new technologies and innovation, especially artificial intelligence. On the one side, people are all excited about it, but on the other hand, people are extremely nervous about it. They are on their toes. So reskilling becoming extremely crucial. Are we having any specific results of discussion at this moment on that?
So I think there are a number of different factors. To your point, the technology has to be both governed and managed well. And at the same time, we have to make sure that we're using the full power of that technology to drive change. So when it comes to governing and managing well, there is an alliance around artificial intelligence that was very recently launched and that continued its dialogue here. In fact, one of the first set of conversations took place here. The second element is how do we ensure that we're using the full power of those technologies? And we tend to talk about artificial intelligence in very general terms, but let's think about what that actually means. So using artificial intelligence, for example, in agriculture, can lead to much higher yields from crops from farms, which is critical for food security. So these things are connected and we have to ensure that technology is being unleashed to solve global challenges. And then there's the third element that you referred to, which is we have to prepare people to be able to work alongside these technologies and to be able to master these technologies to some extent so that they're able to feel comfortable in their own journey in using that. And there's many different aspects to that. The forum created a 10-year initiative on the reskilling revolution, started in 2020 through to 2030. Here at this meeting, we were able to bring in more participants from Asia as well as from around the world that have committed to joining the reskilling revolution.
Right.
In January, we announced that 350 million people had been reskilled through this initiative. We hope that in part because of the impetus at this meeting, we'll be able to get to an even higher target by the time we come together again in a year's time. So much work is underway that is very tangible, but I think it's also about mindset change.
Right.
We have to think about what those human capital investments will then lead to in terms of supporting workers, but also leading to much greater creativity and innovation in the workforce, in companies, and for economies as a whole.
Having said that, though, another issue I would like to ask you, if you listen to many of the speakers this year at ANC, a lot of people are concerned about rhetorics these days, are louder than realities. And I know this time the forum has managed to bring both Chinese and international press. Now that's one of the channels, at least, where words are spread around. So how do you see this issue about rhetorics vis-a-vis realities, and how can we bring the two closer rather than so different right now?
I think it's understandable that the last 3 years have seen so much fragmentation, so much inward-looking focus in different countries, a major global shock that the whole world suffered from. It's somewhat natural that we are in these dislocated spaces, but that's exactly why we need to spend time coming back together again. That was exactly the purpose of this meeting held here in Tianjin, so that we can start rebuilding those bridges. And I think if we think about the outcomes coming from this meeting, if we think about the conversations that were held over here, it's very clear that there is actually a desire to get back to greater global cooperation, to find those win-win approaches. There is actually no way forward but for us to be cooperating again.
I remember at the opening ceremony, after the Chinese Premier Li Qiang delivered the speech, which he talked about cooperation and right mindset today, Chinese Premier using the analogy of the dragon boat competition, because that's one of the ways that Chinese are gearing up the spirit and pay tribute to the ancestors. Professor Schwab said, let's pedal. That, of course, won a lot of laughter in the audience for the humor. But on the other hand, actions, rolling up the sleeves and get to work, so important. From the forum's perspective, what's next?
The forum has, for over 50 years, stood for global cooperation. That will remain central to our set of work. But what we've layered on is ongoing initiatives that can actually continue to take forward progress. And roughly speaking, those initiatives are in 5 key areas. 1 around climate and nature and energy transition, 2 around education, skills, human capital development, 3 around technological progress and harnessing emerging technologies well for the future. 3rd, ensuring that a lot of what we do has not just global frameworks, but also much more local applications and local relevance, and so on. So that's where, especially over the last few years, we've set up very clear centers for excellence around these activities, where the forum continues to provide insights so that the world can benefit from the collective insights of various leaders, putting forward surveys, data, and research. But second, following that up with initiatives that allow for global leaders to cooperate. Coalitions of the willing, people who are willing to find those win-win approaches and take forward interesting, innovative experiments and see if we can make progress faster. And very often those pilots and those test cases then lead to further global initiatives that are sometimes spun out of the forum. So that's sort of our methodology for change. And then, of course, meetings and moments such as this one provide an opportunity to take stock, to create progress, to advance and create new initiatives.
Right. And my final question, this time 3 years coming back to China, the Summer Davos. What is your observation of China, where it is, and how do you see this momentum can be kept in terms of cooperation, communication?
I think if we look at the data, the whole world's eyes are on China, and there's a lot of hope, a lot of optimism being put into the fact that China has reopened. 70% of global growth is going to come from this region, much of that from China. The first quarter's performance in China has been, again, very promising. There are, of course, challenges. There are things to look at in the housing market in terms of youth unemployment. And much of that has been discussed very openly here at this meeting. And I think many business leaders are walking away thinking about both the investment potential, but also how they can be working more closely with China and bringing Chinese investment to other parts of the world. So I think we've seen both of that happening. And there were enough important seeds of progress that were laid here that I think will continue into the future and continue to be taken forward, both at the forum and the forum's platforms as well as elsewhere.